You don't break when no one is there for you. You break when you abandon yourself. Written and published by Q Vibe. What if the hardest moments of your life weren't proof that you were weak, but proof that something stronger was being asked of you? Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that the old ways no longer work. You still show up. You still do what's expected. You still smile, reply, perform, function, but inside, something feels off. The reassurance doesn't calm you anymore. The approval doesn't satisfy you. The noise that once distracted you now feels exhausting. You are not falling apart. You are outgrowing the version of yourself that survived by leaning outward. This is the conflict most adults never name. You want peace, but you keep seeking it from people who are just as unstable as you feel. You want to feel secure, but you tie your worth to attention, understanding, praise, and presence that can disappear at any moment. When those things are missing, the mind panics, the heart tightens, and life starts to feel unfair, lonely, and heavy. Not because you are incapable, but because you were never taught how to hold yourself. This book does not promise comfort. It offers something more durable. It explores what happens when you stop outsourcing your stability, when you stop begging to be understood, when you stop turning pain into identity, and when you begin building an inner structure that doesn't collapse in silence, not through motivation, not through fantasy, but through clarity, responsibility, and quiet strength that grows when no one is clapping. So here is the invitation. Stay with this audiobook. Let it challenge the habits that once protected you but now limit you. Ask yourself one honest question as you listen. Where have you been waiting to be rescued instead of becoming solid? If you walk through this journey fully, you won't just understand yourself better. You'll come out steadier, calmer, and no longer dependent on the world to tell you who you are. Chapter 1. Loneliness. The first initiation of strength. Loneliness is not the same thing as having no one around you. It is the moment you stop resonating with the life that used to fit. You can still show up to work, still reply to messages, still sit at the same dinner table, yet something inside you quietly refuses to pretend anymore. The jokes feel thinner. The conversations feel repeated. The goals that once impressed you now feel like borrowed goals. That shift is not a personal failure. And it is not a mood that needs fixing. It is the beginning of an initiation. The first gate of real strength. What many describe as a dark night of the soul. Not darkness because life is evil, but darkness because the old light no longer reaches you. When this happens, the persona starts to crack. The social mask that helped you survive, belong, perform, and keep the peace. For years, that persona may have been useful. It earned approval, avoided conflict, kept you employed, kept you included, kept you fine. But growth begins when what once protected you begins to suffocate you. The uncomfortable truth is that the persona cannot carry you into your next life, and loneliness is often the pressure that forces the separation. At first, the mind interprets this separation as abandonment. It tells you that you are behind, unchosen, forgotten, irrelevant. Yet look closer. What is really happening is that you are being pulled away from the version of you that was built to be digestible. In this season, silence becomes unavoidable, and silence is not gentle. Silence does not distract you. Silence does not flatter you. Silence makes you face yourself. That is why so many people run the moment it arrives. They fill every gap with noise, scrolling, overtime, rebound relationships, constant plans, constant busyness. Anything that prevents the one conversation that cannot be avoided forever. the conversation between you and you. Loneliness is that conversation beginning. It is the moment your nervous system stops receiving the familiar signals of belonging and is forced to build a new kind of grounding from within. This is why it feels like a night sea journey. You are no longer walking on the shore where everything is visible and explained. You are moving across inner water where certainty disappears, where the horizon is unclear, where the only reliable compass is honesty. In that journey, you begin to notice what you were previously too distracted to admit. How often you performed instead of lived. How often you agreed instead of chose. How often you stayed quiet, not out of peace but out of fear. How often you kept relationships alive through effort that was never equally returned. Loneliness brings these truths up like salt rising from deep water. It can sting, but it also cleans. It strips away the fantasy that someone else will rescue you from yourself. It confronts you with a simple responsibility. Become the kind of person who can sit with your own life without needing an audience. This is where strength starts forming, not the loud strength of dominance, but the quiet strength of self-possession. Think of an oak tree in winter. No fruit, no flowers, no celebration, just bare branches and cold air. To an impatient eye, it looks dead. But winter is when the roots go deeper. Winter is when the tree becomes serious. The same is true for you. A lonely season is not proof that you are falling behind. It is evidence that you are growing downwards, building foundations that will hold your next level of life. If you try to escape this season too quickly, you may stay socially active and still remain internally weak, because the person you become in noise is the person who cannot stand alone when life eventually gets quiet again. Loneliness invites a different training. Learning to hold your own emotional weight. Learning to hear your own thoughts without obeying every one of them. Learning to witness your own pain without turning it into drama. Learning to tolerate uncertainty without begging for immediate answers. This is not romantic. It is discipline, and it is deeply practical for adult life, because adulthood is full of moments where no one claps for you. Raising children when nobody sees the exhaustion. Carrying responsibilities that never end. Rebuilding after a breakup, managing health issues, paying bills, showing up to work with a heavy heart, making choices that protect your future instead of feeding your impulses. Loneliness teaches you to do the hard things without emotional applause. That is why it is the first initiation of strength. In this stage, your job is not to fix loneliness by collecting people. Your job is to stop treating loneliness as a verdict and start treating it as information. It is telling you that the old world is no longer your home. It is telling you that your inner life is asking for a higher level of truth. It is telling you that you are ready to stop living as a product and start living as a person. So instead of rushing to replace the emptiness, stay long enough to understand it. Let the silence show you what you have been avoiding. Let it reveal what you actually value when no one is watching. Let it expose the places where you abandoned yourself to keep peace. Let it highlight the relationships that required you to shrink. Let it bring your unmet needs to the surface so they can finally be met by mature choices, not by desperate bargaining. If your days feel like fog, do not panic. Fog is not a wall, it is a transition. Walk anyway. Keep your routines simple and clean. Protect your mornings from noise. Give yourself honest time. A walk without headphones. A journal without performance. A room without screens. A breath that is slow enough to let you feel what you feel. Pay attention to what emerges when there is nothing to distract you, because what emerges is often the real you trying to come back online. You may discover grief you never processed, anger you never expressed, dreams you postponed for years, desires you judged as unrealistic, boundaries you never set, talents you hid to avoid being seen. None of that appears to punish you. It appears because you are finally strong enough to carry it. And as the persona continues to crack, you will notice a strange new clarity. The need to impress begins to weaken. The need to explain begins to fade. The need to be liked begins to lose its grip. That is the beginning of freedom. The night sea journey does not end with fireworks. It ends with a quieter miracle. You begin to feel anchored inside yourself. You begin to prefer truth over belonging. You begin to choose depth over approval. You begin to recognize that being misunderstood by the wrong people is not a tragedy, it is a correction. Loneliness does not arrive to punish you. It arrives to separate you from the old you, the version that survived by pleasing, performing, blending in, and staying small enough to be accepted. This season is not a curse. It is an initiation. It is the soul's way of saying, the old identity has done its job, and now it is time to grow beyond it. Stay patient. Stay honest. Let the winter do its work. Let the sea teach you how to navigate without external lights. Because when you come out of this, you will not just be social again, you will be real. You will not just be around people. You will be with yourself, and that is where strength begins. Chapter 2. Stop seeking comfort. Learn to hold yourself. There is a moment in adulthood when the old strategy stops working. The strategy of reaching outward every time something hurts. You feel the emptiness, you feel the tension, you feel the restlessness in your chest. And your first instinct is to find a person to calm it down. A message, a voice, a hand to hold, a sign that someone is still there. This is not weakness. This is conditioning. But it becomes a problem the day you start treating another human being as the medicine for a wound they did not create and can never permanently heal. Emotional independence begins the moment you see this clearly. The hunger is real, but the solution has been misplaced. When you expect someone else to fill what is hollow inside you, you are building a life where your peace depends on their availability, their mood, their timing, their attention. That is not love. That is dependence wearing the clothes of love. And dependence has a predictable pattern. The more you need reassurance, the more you panic when reassurance is delayed. And the more you panic, the more you chase, over-explain, check, reread, and spiral. You stop living your actual day and start living inside someone else's response. The silence of a phone becomes a courtroom. The withdrawal of a partner becomes a verdict on your worth. A short reply becomes a punishment. A late reply becomes a threat. In that state, you are no longer choosing connection. You are outsourcing regulation. You are handing the steering wheel of your nervous system to someone who never agreed to drive it. This is where projection quietly takes over. Projection is not only seeing your fears in another person. It is using another person as a mirror to measure your value. When they are warm, you feel worthy. When they are distracted, you feel disposable. When they praise you, you feel real. When they forget, you feel erased. That is why withdrawal feels so violent. It is not just the loss of contact. It is the collapse of the borrowed identity you were using to stand upright. And the truth that changes everything is not romantic. It is structural. No one can be your permanent regulator. No one can be your constant witness. No one can carry your inner child forever. Even the kindest person will eventually get tired, get busy, get overwhelmed, or simply be human. If your stability requires their constant presence, your stability will always be fragile. This is why the next stage of strength is not finding better people. It is becoming the person inside you who can hold you when no one else is holding you. Self-soothing is not a soft skill. It is the backbone of emotional independence. It is the ability to stay with your own discomfort without panicking, without running, without begging life to rescue you from your own feelings. It is the decision to become the inner father and inner mother your younger self needed. The steady presence that does not shame your emotions. The calm voice that does not abandon you when you cry. The guidance that does not disappear when the world gets cold. Picture the adult version of you stepping into the room where your fear is shaking. Not with speeches, not with denial, with grounded warmth, with a simple message: you are safe enough to stay. Because what you truly needed all along was not someone else's attention. What you needed was your own loyalty. This is the turning point line that marks the end of emotional dependency and the beginning of real power. You don't need anyone to save you. You just need to not abandon yourself. Read that slowly. Saving is dramatic, external, and temporary. Not abandoning yourself is quiet, internal, and permanent. It means that when the mind starts bargaining, when it says, text again, explain more, prove your value, chase the feeling, your deeper self interrupts the pattern and says, come back, breathe, sit down, feel it, name it, hold it. That is strength. Adults often believe strength is the ability to endure without feeling, but real strength is the ability to feel without collapsing into childish strategies. The most dangerous comfort seeking is not even in relationships. It is the comfort seeking that looks productive. Overworking to avoid loneliness, scrolling to avoid silence, drinking to avoid grief, flirting to avoid facing your own unmet needs, saying yes to everyone so you never have to sit with your own emptiness. Comfort becomes addiction when it is used to escape the self. And the price is always the same. You lose your center. You become easy to control because anyone who can remove your comfort can remove your stability. This is why learning to hold yourself changes your entire life. When you can regulate your own emotions, you stop being manipulated by distance. You stop being controlled by other people's withdrawal, moods, or inconsistency. You can still care, still love, still want connection, but you no longer fall apart when connection is imperfect. You become a person who can stay steady inside uncertainty. And that steadiness is rare. It is also deeply magnetic because it communicates maturity without announcing it. So, what does holding yourself look like in real life, in the life of a grown adult with deadlines, responsibilities, family pressures, and accumulated disappointments? It looks like pausing before reacting. It looks like not sending the second text when your chest tightens. It looks like letting the anxious thought exist without treating it as an emergency. It looks like placing a hand on your chest, breathing slower than your fear wants you to, and saying, you are not being abandoned right now, you are being activated. It looks like choosing a grounded action instead of a desperate one. Take a walk, drink water, write what you are feeling without editing it. Clean one small corner of your space. Do one meaningful task you have been delaying, because action done from self-respect is medicine. It looks like separating fact from story. The fact is someone is quiet. The story is you are unlovable. The fact is someone is distant. The story is you are not enough. When you hold yourself, you honor the fact and refuse the story. You stop using other people as judges and start using your own awareness as a compass. And yes, holding yourself also means grieving. Emotional independence is not pretending you do not need anyone. It is admitting that you want love, while refusing to collapse without it. It is allowing sadness to move through you without turning sadness into self-rejection. It is letting longing exist without turning longing into chasing. Because chasing is not intimacy. Chasing is fear. When you learn to soothe yourself, you begin to experience a new kind of peace. The peace of being whole in your own company. You can sit alone in a cafe and not feel punished by silence. You can go to bed without needing one more message to feel safe. You can make decisions without needing constant approval. You can feel the ache of missing someone without letting that ache dictate your dignity. This is what people mean when they say you become emotionally independent. Not detached, not cold, not numb, but anchored. You become the kind of person who can love without begging, who can commit without losing identity, who can leave without hatred, who can stay without self-betrayal. And from this place, something almost shocking happens. Relationships improve, not because you become perfect, but because you become clear. When you stop demanding that others regulate you, you stop punishing them for being human. When you stop using someone as the measure of your worth, you stop resenting them for failing to carry a weight that was never theirs. You become calmer, which makes you more honest. You become steadier, which makes you more trustworthy. You start choosing people from wholeness, not from hunger. And if someone withdraws, you can finally see what is true without panic. Maybe they are overwhelmed. Maybe they are avoidant. Maybe they are simply not aligned with you. Whatever the reason, your identity does not collapse. Your nervous system does not hand them your power. You hold yourself through the wave, and the wave passes. This is the quiet victory. You stop being controlled by absence. You stop being dragged by silence. You stop needing someone to prove you are okay. You prove it by staying with yourself. So ask yourself with brutal honesty, where has comfort-seeking been disguised as love in your life? Where have you been trying to be rescued instead of learning to stand? Where have you made someone else responsible for a feeling that started long before they arrived? The goal is not to blame yourself. The goal is to reclaim yourself. Because the strongest shift you can make is not finding the perfect person who never withdraws. The strongest shift is becoming the person inside you who never disappears when things get hard. When you learn to hold yourself, you stop bargaining for crumbs. You stop interpreting distance as destiny. You stop performing for reassurance. You become emotionally solid, and that solidity changes everything. When you know how to comfort yourself, you are no longer controlled by other people's withdrawal. You can be disappointed without being destroyed. You can be alone without being lost. You can be unloved by someone and still remain loving toward yourself. That is not just emotional independence. That is adulthood in its deepest form. Chapter 3. Stop complaining. Leave the victim identity. Complaining feels harmless because it sounds like honesty, but most of the time it is the shadow of self-pity wearing the clothes of being real. It is not the same as naming pain. Pain is a fact. Complaining is what happens when pain becomes a story you repeat until it turns into an identity. And that identity always has the same shape: powerless, unlucky, misunderstood, trapped. That is why complaining keeps you in the same place, even while your mouth is moving. It locks you into the position of someone waiting to be rescued, someone waiting for life to finally become fair, someone waiting for people to finally act right so you can finally feel okay. This is the quiet trap. The more you complain, the more your nervous system learns the belief that you cannot act, you can only react. The victim identity is not built in one dramatic moment. It is built in small, daily sentences that seem normal. This always happens to you. No one ever helps you. You try so hard and nothing changes. People are the problem. The world is against you. Each sentence is a vote for helplessness. Each sentence trains your mind to look outward for permission to feel stable. And when no one is there for you, that mindset becomes poison. Because it makes you stare at the empty space where support should be, instead of using the strength that still exists inside you. A complaint is often a disguised demand. Reality should not be like this. People should not be like this. Your past should not have happened. Your body should not feel tired. Your efforts should not go unseen. But reality does not negotiate, and life does not pause to explain itself. The longer you argue with what already is, the longer you stay stuck in the emotional posture of begging. The shift begins when you notice the difference between two questions. Why me, and what can you do with this? Why me sounds deep, but it is usually a sedative. It gives you a story without requiring movement. It keeps your attention on unfairness, and unfairness is endless. There will always be someone who had it easier, someone who hurt you, someone who failed you, someone who got credit you deserved, someone who left you carrying more than your share. If your mind lives there, you will always have evidence for your suffering, and you will never run out of reasons to stay small. What can you do with this is different. It does not deny pain. It takes pain seriously enough to convert it into a decision. It moves your focus from the court of complaints to the workshop of change. It asks for responsibility, not blame. And responsibility is the doorway out of helplessness. Complaining is also a form of fake action. It gives your brain the sensation of doing something while you do nothing that changes your situation. It is emotional motion without real movement. The mind loves this because it is safer than risk. If you complain, you get to feel righteous without being exposed. You get to feel seen without being challenged. You get to feel like a survivor without having to become the author of your next chapter. But fake action has a cost. It drains energy. It steals time. It keeps your nervous system in a loop of irritation and defeat. It makes you rehearse the same wound until it becomes familiar, and familiarity starts to feel like truth. This is why the victim identity can feel strangely comforting even while it ruins your life. At least it is known. At least it explains your pain. At least it gives you a reason to stop trying. And yet, deep down, you already know the truth. No one is coming to save you from the consequences of your own repeated patterns. That truth is not cruel. It is freeing. Because the moment you accept that, you stop wasting your strength on speeches and start investing it in choices. Picture a stone at the bottom of a river. The river does not care about the stone's opinion. The current hits it, drags it, scrapes it, pushes it against other rocks, and keeps moving. If the stone could speak, it would complain about the force, the unfairness, the constant pressure. But over time, the current that seemed violent polishes the stone. The edges soften. The surface becomes smooth. What looked like punishment becomes shaping. Life works the same way. Hard seasons, betrayal, loneliness, disappointment, exhaustion, rejection. All of it is current. You can spend years cursing the current, telling the same story to anyone who will listen, collecting sympathy like a currency that never buys freedom. Or you can let the current shape you by learning how to move inside it. The river does not need you to approve of it. It only asks one question. Will you become bitter or will you become refined? A victim identity always chooses bitter because bitter feels like control. It is the ego's way of saying, "You may have hurt me, but you will not make me change." That is pride disguised as pain. Leaving the victim identity means choosing a more difficult power, the power to transform. And transformation requires action, not narration. There is a story that illustrates this perfectly. A woman carries a painful betrayal for years. The details are always ready. She can tell the story in perfect order. What they said, what they did, how unfair it was, how she never deserved it. And each time she tells it, she feels the same surge, the same heat, the same tightness in her chest, the same shaking in her voice. People listen, they empathize, they validate her, and for a moment she feels relief. But after the conversation ends, she is still in the same place. The story has become a home, and the home is built out of injury. One day she notices something. The betrayal happened once, but the retelling happens every week, sometimes every day, sometimes in her own mind at 2 a.m. The original event was real, but the repetition is a choice. Not a conscious choice at first, but a practiced one. She begins to ask a brutal question. If no one was there to hear this story, would she still carry it the same way? And the honest answer is no, because the story is doing a hidden job. It protects her from the risk of moving forward. As long as she is the betrayed one, she does not have to become the builder. As long as she is the victim, she does not have to face the fear of a new life, a new identity, new standards, new boundaries, new possibilities. The moment she sees that, the story loses some of its grip. She still grieves, but she stops advertising her wound as proof of who she is. She begins to do something else. She takes the energy of that pain and puts it into an action that changes her future. She learns a skill. She strengthens her body. She updates her boundaries. She chooses better people. She becomes more honest with herself. She becomes the kind of person who would never again stay where disrespect is normal. That is what it means to act from pain instead of living inside it. You do not become stronger by telling the world how much you suffered. You become stronger by using that suffering as fuel for a new direction. This is where maturity begins. Not in the denial of hurt, but in the refusal to let hurt become your identity. Leaving the victim identity does not mean pretending nothing happened. It means refusing to hand your future to what happened. It means stepping out of the hypnotic loop, where your mouth repeats the past while your life stays the same. You can still name what happened with clarity, but you stop using it as a reason to stop growing. You stop using it as a weapon against yourself. You stop using it as a permanent excuse. The victim identity often hides behind a false morality. You are just being honest. You are just venting. You deserve to express it. Yes, you deserve to express it, but expression without evolution becomes self-sabotage. If you vent every day and your life does not change, the venting is not healing you. It is keeping you warm inside your own prison. Healing is not the moment you talk about it. Healing is the moment you start living differently because of what you learned from it. That is why the most important upgrade is the question you ask yourself when frustration rises. When the urge to complain shows up, pause and listen to what your nervous system is trying to do. Often, it is trying to discharge discomfort by throwing it outward. But you can redirect that energy. You can ask, what is the smallest action that would move you one step forward right now? Not the perfect action, not the dramatic action. The smallest one that proves you are no longer helpless. Because helplessness is a habit, and habits are broken by consistent proof. Proof is action. Proof is sending one email, making one phone call, doing one workout, setting one boundary, apologizing once where you were wrong, walking away once where you were disrespected, turning your phone off once so your mind can breathe, saying one honest sentence instead of 100 bitter ones. This is not about becoming cold. It is about becoming responsible. The victim identity loves the question, "Why me?" because it makes you the center of the tragedy. But strength asks a better question. What can this make you? That question turns your suffering into raw material. And raw material is valuable because it can become something. The victim identity believes pain is a verdict. Strength knows pain can be a teacher. The victim identity wants comfort first. Strength wants clarity first, and clarity is what returns your power. When you stop complaining, you do not lose your sensitivity. You lose your paralysis. You stop feeding the part of you that loves to stay wounded because wounded feels protected. You start feeding the part of you that can build. And when you build, even slowly, your nervous system begins to trust you again. It begins to believe you are safe because you act. That is a different kind of safety than being rescued. It is the safety of self-leadership, the quiet confidence that grows when you know you will not abandon yourself in hard moments. So the real work is simple and demanding. Feel what you feel, tell the truth, then move. Let your pain speak once, then let your actions speak every day after that. Let the story be acknowledged, then let it end. Because your future is not asking you to explain yourself. It is asking you to become someone new. And you do not become someone new by rehearsing what broke you. You become someone new by taking what broke you and turning it into a structure that can hold you. That is how you rise when no one is there for you. Not by collecting sympathy, not by repeating your wounds, not by waiting for reality to become fair, but by choosing a stronger question, rejecting fake action, and taking real steps from the very place that hurt. Chapter 4. Become your own source of validation. There is a specific kind of pain that only adulthood teaches you, and it is not the pain of working hard. It is the pain of working hard while feeling invisible. You show up early, you carry responsibility, you keep promises, you solve problems that no one else wants to touch, and yet the room stays quiet. No praise, no recognition. No one saying, "That mattered." This is where many people quietly collapse, not because they cannot handle effort, but because they cannot handle being unseen. The deepest fear is rarely failure. It is the fear that your effort will disappear into the air like smoke, that your life will leave no mark, that you could be replaced tomorrow, and the world would keep moving as if you were never there. That fear makes people perform. It makes them chase applause, post proof, over-explain their value, and beg the outside world to confirm what they have not learned to confirm inside. But the moment you tie your worth to external applause, you become fragile. Because applause is unpredictable. It depends on timing, politics, mood, popularity, and other people's hunger to feel superior. Today they celebrate you. Tomorrow they forget you. And if your identity is built on being noticed, you will live in a constant state of emotional bargaining. Carl Jung warned that when a person cannot witness their own value, they will outsource their soul to the crowd. You start shaping your choices around what gets approval instead of what builds integrity, and that is how a strong person becomes exhausted. The turning point is this. You learn to validate yourself before anyone else does, not with ego, not with arrogance, but with clear, disciplined self-recognition. Self-validation is not pretending you are perfect. It is refusing to act as if your effort has no meaning unless someone claps. It is becoming the witness of your own life. Think of the Cassandra archetype, the one who sees truth, speaks truth. Cassandra is not tragic because no one believed her. She is tragic because isolation can tempt a person to abandon their own knowing. In adult life, Cassandra shows up whenever you tell the truth and it costs you, whenever you do the right thing and nobody rewards you, whenever you change your patterns and no one praises the growth because they were comfortable with the old version of you. If you cannot validate your own courage in those moments, you will either shrink back into people-pleasing or harden into resentment. But if you can stand there and say, quietly and honestly, this effort counts, you begin to live from a deeper center. This is the difference between action driven by ego and action driven by the self. Ego acts to be seen. The self acts because it is aligned. Ego needs proof. The self needs truth. Ego demands a spotlight. The self can work in silence and still feel grounded. That shift changes everything, because your life stops being a performance and becomes a practice. Start training this the same way you train a muscle, with small, repeatable moves. At the end of a hard day, write down what you did that required strength, even if nobody noticed. The uncomfortable conversation you handled with restraint, the temptation you resisted, the promise you kept, the work you finished despite fatigue, the moment you chose calm instead of reaction, the moment you chose dignity instead of revenge. Then acknowledge it as a fact, not as a compliment. You are not trying to hype yourself. You are recording reality. Next, reward effort in a clean way, not with self-sabotage, but with something that reinforces respect. Rest without guilt, a quiet walk, a good meal, a chapter of a book, a night of sleep earned honestly. Your nervous system learns through repetition. And when you repeatedly recognize your own effort, you stop starving for external approval. You also become harder to manipulate, because flattery no longer controls you, and criticism no longer collapses you. And this matters in real life, where bosses overlook you, where family members take you for granted, where friends forget to ask how you are doing, where a partner notices your mistakes faster than your growth. If your validation comes only from outside, you will always feel like a beggar in your own life. You can still enjoy being seen without fearing the silence. This is not isolation. This is maturity. And it produces a quiet strength other people can feel, even when you say nothing, because you stop chasing attention and start carrying presence. Your work becomes cleaner, your relationships become more balanced, your boundaries become easier, and your confidence becomes less performative and more stable. The world may still overlook you sometimes, but it will no longer be able to erase you because you will not erase yourself. When you look at your own effort with honesty, when you witness your own becoming, you stop living like a person waiting to be chosen. You become a person who chooses, and when you truly see yourself, you no longer need the world to see you. Chapter 5. Rise quickly. Turn failure into fire. Failure feels like a verdict when it happens in the dark, when no one is there to soften the landing, when the only sound you hear is your own mind replaying the moment you fell. But failure is rarely the end of your story. More often, it is the moment your story stops being a performance and starts becoming real. Every time you collapse, something important gets exposed. The part of you that still needs approval, the part that still tries to look invincible, the part that still believes love and respect must be earned by never slipping. That is why failure hurts in a specific way. It does not only threaten your outcome, it threatens your image. And that is exactly why it has the power to wake you up. A clean life with no falls can keep you asleep inside a comfortable identity. A hard fall strips the costume. It pulls off the polite mask. It drags your hidden motives into the light. This is what people mean when they say the shadow returns, not as punishment, but as information. When you fail, you are forced to see what still controls you. Fear of criticism, hunger to be chosen, addiction to control, avoidance of humility, the secret belief that you must never disappoint anyone. Failure does not break you. It peels you. It removes what was never stable. It exposes what is. And if you respond with speed and honesty, it becomes fuel instead of a chain. The danger is not falling. The danger is negotiating with the fall until it becomes your identity. Staying down turns a moment into a lifestyle. Staying down turns a lesson into a label. Staying down turns a mistake into a personality. Rising quickly is the discipline of refusing to let one event rewrite who you are. Rising quickly is not pretending it did not hurt. Rising quickly is admitting the sting and still moving forward before shame builds a home inside your chest. Because shame loves time. Give it enough days, and it will start speaking in your voice. It will tell you that you always fail, that you are too late, that you are not built for greatness, that you should return to being smaller so you can be safe. And if you listen, you will not only lose your momentum, you will lose your future. This is why action matters more than regret. Regret feels like accountability, but most regret is just emotional self-punishment wearing a serious face. It loops the same memory and calls that growth. It rehearses the same conversation and calls that wisdom. It stares at the wound and calls that healing. But the brain does not heal through staring. The brain heals through movement. When failure hits, your nervous system registers a gap between expectation and reality, a sharp internal signal that something must change. If you respond with rumination, your body stays in threat mode. Tension rises, sleep gets lighter, your chest tightens, your thoughts race, your energy drains. The longer you stay in that loop, the more your mind associates the future with danger. But when you respond with a small, clear action, something shifts. The part of your brain that plans and chooses turns back on. Your body gets a message. There is still agency here. Even one step interrupts the paralysis. Even one honest phone call, one apology, one corrected task, one workout, one application, one page written, one routine restarted, tells your nervous system that the story is not over. Action is not just productivity. Action is biological reassurance. It is how you teach your system to stop panicking and start adapting. Rising quickly also requires a hard truth. Failure is not always about the world being unfair. Sometimes it is about your patterns finally becoming visible. Sometimes the fall is exposing what you kept avoiding, the relationship you kept excusing, the habit you kept delaying, the standard you kept lowering, the boundary you kept refusing to set, the discipline you kept promising you would start tomorrow. Rock bottom is brutal because it removes your ability to lie convincingly. It forces you into clarity, and clarity, even when it hurts, is a gift because it ends confusion. The moment you stop asking why this happened and start asking what this is revealing, you take back power. The moment you ask what part of you was involved, what part of you ignored signs, what part of you stayed passive, what part of you tried to please, what part of you wanted comfort more than truth, you begin turning failure into fire. Fire does not mean rage. Fire means energy with direction. Fire means pain that gets converted into discipline. Fire means a wound that becomes a compass. There is a reason the phoenix is the symbol here. The phoenix is not a creature that avoids destruction. It is a creature that uses destruction as a doorway. The myth is not about being fearless. It is about being willing to burn what is no longer true so something stronger can be born. In real life, this looks less dramatic but more powerful. You stop romanticizing your excuses. You stop treating your collapse like proof of weakness, and you start treating it like the moment your life demanded an upgrade. You begin again without waiting to feel confident. You rebuild before you feel ready. You do not need inspiration to rise. You need decision. And the decision is simple. The fall will not be your home. So rise quickly in a practical way. First, name the failure in plain language, without dramatic identity statements. Not "you are ruined," but "that project failed, that relationship ended, that habit returned, that opportunity was missed, that choice was careless." Second, extract the lesson with honesty, not cruelty. Ask what was ignored, what was tolerated, what was overestimated, what was underestimated. Third, take one corrective action within a short window. Before your mind builds a prison out of the story, send the email, make the appointment, write the plan, clean the space, fix the mistake, start the routine, tell the truth. Fourth, protect your momentum by returning to basics. Sleep, movement, structure, simple commitments you can keep. Your identity does not need grand speeches after a fall. Your identity needs evidence. Evidence comes from small wins repeated. Rising quickly also means refusing to use failure as an excuse to become bitter. Bitter people fall and decide the world is against them. Strong people fall and decide they will become wiser. Bitter people fall and demand compensation. Strong people fall and build capacity. Because the deepest purpose of failure is not humiliation, it is revelation. The fake layers come off. The real foundation shows. And if you keep moving, you realize something surprising. You are still here. You can still choose. You can still rebuild. Falling did not make you weak. Falling simply showed you where you were still human, still learning, still unfinished. Staying down is what makes you weak, because staying down trains your nervous system to accept defeat as normal. Rising trains your system to expect recovery. And recovery is one of the most valuable skills you can develop as an adult. Life will not stop testing you. People will disappoint you. Plans will break. Timing will fail you. Your own emotions will wobble. Your own discipline will slip. The goal is not to become someone who never falls. The goal is to become someone who does not live inside the fall. The moment you stand up again, the moment you take one honest step, you become proof to yourself that collapse is not the end of you. It is the beginning of a truer version of you. Rock bottom is not a grave. It is a floor, and floors are for pushing off. Rise quickly. Let the fall burn the mask. Let the pain sharpen the truth. Let failure become fire, not because your life needs drama, but because your life deserves momentum. Chapter 6. Act without inspiration. Will over emotion. There will be days when nothing inside you feels like moving. No spark, no excitement, no sudden wave of motivation that makes life feel easy. You still have responsibilities, deadlines, people depending on you, and a version of yourself you promised you would become. But your emotions show up tired, flat, and uncooperative. This is where most people unknowingly hand their life over to chance. They wait for a mood. They wait for confidence. They wait for the perfect morning where the mind feels clean and the heart feels brave. And while they wait, months slip into years. Your breakthrough does not arrive when inspiration finally visits. Your breakthrough arrives when you learn to act without it. Because will is not a pretty feeling. Will is an organizing force. It is the inner authority that takes the chaos of your psyche and gives it direction. Emotion is weather. Will is the compass. Emotion is wind. Will is the hand on the wheel. The wind can help you, sure, but the wind is unreliable. Some days it disappears. Some days it blows against you. If you build your life on wind, you will live in constant delay. But if you build your life on direction, you keep moving even when the air is dead. This is not about becoming cold or robotic. It is about becoming dependable to yourself. A mature life is not a life where you always feel good. It is a life where you keep your word even when you do not. That is what separates people who have potential from people who have results. Potential is emotional. Results are disciplined. And discipline becomes most visible when nobody is clapping, when nobody is watching, when the room is quiet, when your phone stays silent, when your effort feels like it disappears into the dark with no proof that it matters. Those are the days that either form you or deform you. Because when no one cheers, the ego has no reward. There is no social fuel, no external validation, no instant praise to make the work feel lighter. All that is left is your relationship with your own standards. That is why acting without inspiration is a form of inner leadership. It is you telling your nervous system, your past, your excuses, and your comfort-seeking habits, you do not get to drive today. Something deeper drives now. And here is the uncomfortable truth. Waiting for inspiration is often a polite form of avoidance. It sounds noble, like you are waiting for the right time, but it keeps you safe from the risk of starting imperfectly. The mind loves this because it protects the ego from failure. If you never begin, you never lose. If you only act when you feel inspired, you can blame the lack of progress on the lack of mood, instead of facing the real issue, a lack of commitment. Commitment is not a promise you make when you feel strong. Commitment is what you do when you feel weak. It is what you do when your emotions argue, when your body drags, when your thoughts try to negotiate for comfort. This is where will becomes sacred, not because it is dramatic, but because it is honest. Will says, even if today is heavy, the direction remains. And the direction matters more than the mood. Think of a parent who cannot afford to wait for motivation. Think of a single mother waking up before sunrise. Not because she feels inspired, but because life demands consistency. She moves through mornings that feel like survival. Packing lunches, catching buses, working long shifts, paying bills that do not care about her feelings, coming home with a body that aches and a mind that wants to shut down. No applause follows her. No crowd celebrates her discipline. And yet she keeps going. Not because she enjoys it, but because she refuses to abandon her responsibilities and her future. There comes a point in that kind of life where inspiration is a luxury, so she builds something stronger than inspiration. A routine, a minimum standard, a small set of actions that happen no matter what. On the worst days, she does not try to be heroic. She tries to be consistent. She makes one decision that keeps her identity intact. Read 10 minutes instead of scrolling. Save a small amount instead of nothing. Walk for 15 minutes instead of collapsing. Fill out one form. Send one email. Practice one skill. It looks unimpressive from the outside, but inside, something powerful is happening. She is teaching her mind that emotion is not the boss. She is teaching her body that progress does not require perfect conditions. And slowly, something flips. She notices that after she begins, energy appears. After the first step, momentum follows. After she honors the smallest promise, her mind becomes quieter. Not because life becomes easy, but because she becomes aligned. This is the transformation most people miss. Will creates inspiration, not the other way around. Inspiration often arrives as a reward for movement. The mind is not designed to give you clarity before action. It gives you clarity through action. When you start, your brain shifts from fantasy to reality. You stop living in the story of what you should do, and you begin living in the evidence of what you are doing. Evidence changes self-belief faster than any motivational speech. And this is why discipline in private is so powerful. It is proof you are not performing. It is proof you are building. The world is full of people who can talk about what they want. The world is rare in people who keep going when they do not feel like it. That quiet persistence builds a stable inner core. It makes you the kind of person who does not need constant emotional permission to act. And once you become that person, life changes. Not because obstacles disappear, but because obstacles no longer negotiate with you. You stop asking, "Do I feel like doing it?" and start asking, "What does the direction require?" That single shift turns chaos into order. It turns a scattered mind into a structured mind. It turns a fragile identity into a reliable identity. If discipline feels harsh, it is because you have been trained to worship emotion. But emotion was never meant to be worshipped. Emotion is meant to be listened to, understood, and guided. You can honor your exhaustion without letting it define your day. You can acknowledge your sadness without building a life inside it. You can feel fear and still move. You can feel uninspired and still act. Acting does not mean denying your humanity. It means refusing to let your humanity become an excuse for stagnation. The practical way to do this is simple and demanding. Decide what non-negotiable looks like on your worst day, not your best day. On your best day, you can do anything. On your worst day, you need a minimum you can still respect. A short walk, one page, one clean meal, one focused hour, one honest conversation, one small act that proves you are still in the game. Then protect it like a boundary. Not because you are chasing perfection, but because you are preserving identity. Over time, you will notice that the days you least wanted to move became the days that quietly shaped you the most. Those were the days your character was built in secret, away from praise. And when you reach the other side of that season, you will realize something. The most dependable force in your life is not inspiration, not other people, not luck, not mood, but the will you trained to carry you forward. That is real strength, not the kind that feels powerful in the moment, but the kind that keeps you progressing when you feel nothing. Because character is not formed in the days you want to move. Character is formed in the days you still move anyway, even when you do not want to. Chapter 7. When no one understands you. Return to yourself. There comes a point where the pain is no longer the struggle itself, but the loneliness of carrying it without being recognized. You are doing the work, showing up, trying again, holding yourself together, and still feeling unseen. And what rises in that season is a hunger that sounds noble, but quietly keeps you dependent. The hunger to be understood. It feels innocent because being understood feels like relief. It feels like safety. It feels like finally being able to breathe without explaining your whole existence. But look closely. The craving to be understood can become another way of asking the outside world to confirm that your inside world is real. It becomes a softer form of external validation. And the more you chase it, the more fragile you become, because no human being can hold the full complexity of your inner life the way you can. People can love you deeply and still not understand the shape of your thoughts. People can mean well and still miss what matters most. People can listen and still interpret your story through their own wounds, their own fears, their own limits. That is not proof that you are too much. It is proof that you are human, and that your depth cannot be reduced into something convenient for someone else's mind. The breakthrough is accepting one hard truth without bitterness. No one will ever fully understand you, and that can be more freeing than it sounds. Because once you stop demanding full comprehension, you stop living as a prisoner of other people's capacity. You stop bleeding energy into rehearsed explanations. You stop trying to translate your soul into a language that someone else can digest. You begin to return to your center. Think of an artist in a small room, making something true while the world outside keeps moving. Most people will never know the hours, the doubt, the obsession with detail, the private wrestling that made the work honest. If that artist needs applause to create, the work becomes a performance. But if that artist returns to the craft itself, returns to the inner reason, it matters, something stabilizes. Or think of a lighthouse. It does not chase ships. It does not beg to be noticed. It stands in one place, rooted and steady, and its steadiness becomes guidance. This is what happens when you stop trying to be understood and start trying to be aligned. Alignment is different. Understanding is something you ask from people. Alignment is something you build inside yourself. And the way you build it is through acceptance. Not resignation, but mature acceptance. One of the deepest psychological insights is simple. Acceptance is not the end of growth. Acceptance is the beginning of transformation. When you stop fighting your own reality, you stop wasting force on inner civil war. When you stop demanding that life be softer, you become stronger without becoming bitter. When you stop demanding that people see you perfectly, you become clearer about what you will give, what you will protect, and what you will no longer negotiate. The inner shift is subtle but decisive. Instead of asking, "Why does nobody get me?" you begin to ask, "Am you abandoning yourself while trying to be understood?" Because that is the hidden cost. The person who keeps searching for someone to finally understand them often becomes a shapeshifter, adjusting tone, shrinking truth, over-explaining, apologizing for feelings, performing calm while drowning inside. That is not connection. That is self-erasure disguised as communication. Returning to yourself means rebuilding an inner home where your thoughts can exist without needing permission. It means learning to sit with your own emotions without immediately outsourcing them. It means being able to say, silently, "This is what is happening inside." And it is valid, even if nobody names it. It also means recognizing that some people will only understand the version of you that benefits them. Some will only like you when you are easy to predict. Some will call you changed the moment you stop leaking your life to keep them comfortable. Let that happen. Not as revenge, but as reality. It is not your job to be digestible. It is your job to be honest. And honesty requires a private loyalty to your own inner truth, especially when nobody claps for it. This is why the most mature form of strength does not look loud. It looks like quiet boundaries. It looks like no longer arguing for your worth. It looks like choosing fewer conversations and deeper ones. It looks like walking away from rooms that require you to betray your own center to stay accepted. It looks like being willing to be misunderstood by shallow minds so you can remain aligned with a deeper one. When you truly return to yourself, you stop needing someone to rescue you with comprehension. You become the one who cannot be lost, because your life is no longer anchored to being seen correctly by others. It is anchored to being seen clearly by you. And once you reach that center, something changes in the way you move through the world. You do not become cold. You become grounded. You can still love, still listen, still connect. But you do not collapse when someone fails to understand you. You do not chase. You do not beg for emotional translation. You do not shrink your soul into a sentence. You hold your own complexity with calm strength. And that is final integration. The moment you stop searching for the person who understands you, you become the person who cannot be abandoned, because you have stopped abandoning yourself. If this journey has taught you anything, it is that the strongest version of you is not built in applause, but in quiet decisions that nobody witnesses. Real strength does not announce itself. It is born in silence, shaped by discipline, and purified by honesty with your soul. When no one is there for you, your old habits panic. The part of you that once survived by pleasing, explaining, proving, and chasing tries to return. It whispers that you need permission to keep going, that you need someone to validate your pain, that you need someone to understand you before you can finally be at peace. But life does not always send that person, and that absence is not cruelty. It is initiation. It forces a question that changes everything. Will you keep living as someone waiting to be saved? Or will you become someone who wakes up? Awakening is not a mystical moment. It is a series of choices where you stop outsourcing your power. It is when you stop needing constant reassurance to stay steady. It is when you stop turning loneliness into proof that you are unwanted and start using it as a doorway into deeper self-respect. It is when you stop complaining as a way to stay familiar with helplessness and start acting as a way to reclaim direction. It is when you stop requiring validation before effort and become your own witness, the one who sees your growth even when nobody else does. It is when you fall, and instead of turning failure into a permanent identity, you turn it into feedback, into fire, into a cleaner kind of courage. It is when you stop waiting to feel inspired and you act from will, from commitment, from the quiet decision that your life deserves consistency. And finally, it is when you stop demanding to be understood by everyone and you return to the only place where your life can become whole, the center inside you that does not depend on anyone's approval to exist. This is what mature power looks like. It is not dramatic. It is stable. It is the ability to keep your heart warm without being naive, to keep your boundaries strong without being cruel, to keep moving forward without begging life to be easier first. The world may still misunderstand you sometimes. People may still leave. Timing may still disappoint. But when your foundation is inside, those events do not erase you. They simply reveal what is real. You were never meant to be carried forever. You were meant to develop the kind of inner structure that holds you steady in work pressure, family responsibility, financial fear, emotional uncertainty, and the quiet nights where no one texts back and no one notices your progress. The reward is not that life becomes perfect. The reward is that you become unshakable in a clean way, without bitterness, without constant defense, without needing to control others to feel safe. When no one is there for you, you don't break, you finally become who you are.